Hello everyone and welcome back to the routing course. I know I minimized that big time. We know it's about a lot more than that, but I didn't want to say that big title. It's just way too big. Anyway, what we're going to start talking about in this lecture is going to be the iOS and some router administration, okay, on the actual router. Okay, now don't freak out what I'm about to pull up. I know what you're going to say once I pull it up. Oh my God, Lazarus using PowerPoint. I'm using it just so I don't forget to say anything. But that's just, you're not going to see it in slideshow view. I'm just going to go right here, okay? And then we're going to be doing it on the packet tracer. Again, there's a guideline for me. I'm not going to read it to you. You're not going to be seeing me read the PowerPoints. You know, I am going to be looking at you explaining each one. I know you're tired of reading. I know you are, or people reading to you. So don't worry. Don't worry. Don't freak out. I'm just using it as a guideline, okay? Anyway, the Cisco iOS is the very first thing that we need to talk about. Now here it says there's two types of iOSs. And let's go ahead and open up, well, not the messenger obviously. What happened to my packet tracer? Okay, the packet tracer went away. No problem, let's go ahead and open it up. Okay. And we're gonna pull up, let's say for right now, let's pull up the 2600. Okay, come on, okay. Doesn't wanna do it that way, we'll do it another way. All right. Now, each router has its own iOS, okay? Depending on what you want to do. Depending on what you want to do. Not all iOSs are equal, all right? Back in one of the things that are just basics, the iOS name, all right, was like very cryptic. It had like, you know, it will tell you the model, the Cisco 2600 series or 2800 series or 2500 series, whatever series of routers you were using. And then it was like -J, -T, -this. You're like, you really didn't get anything from it to let you know what the iOS was about. But with the newer routers, the integrated service routers, the iOS is no longer that encrypted. One of the iOSs that we'll be using is one called Advanced IP Services, which is in the 2800 series router, which it will tell you, or it'll let you know that you're able to do advanced configurations, such as IPsec, configuring IPsec when you're doing VPN tunnels. All right, but not each iOS is the same. And also, there's another type of iOS called XR. And really, I don't want to keep saying iOS, more operating system, because it is the operating system of the router. You have an iOS operating system, and you have an XR operating system. You're not going to get tested at all on the XR operating system. But if you find yourself, once you get your CCNA, that you've gotten a job in a very good company and they have big routers. I'm not going to say big routers, that's pretty elementary. I'm going to say ASR routers, okay? They use both, but some of them do have the XR operating system. Cisco themselves has a certification specific to that iOS, all right? But again, that's way up there. Don't worry about it. Know that it exists. Know that when you go out there, okay, that you may run into something like that. And there's differences. There's differences in how you, let's say, save. And I think I've mentioned that in my previous lessons or previous courses. Like here with the iOS, you do a copy run start. And the XR operating systems, you would do a commit. All right, and again, not all iOSs are the same. And if you were to go to a Juniper router, if you were to go to an F5 router, if you were to go to a Dell router, all these different routers have their own particular iOS, all right? Could be similar in the navigation, similar, but not equal, all right? But as far as for our certifications, we're going to be working with the iOS, all right? And each iOS has its version, all right? Now, when the iOS will boot up, and we're going to take a look at it right now, I'm going to turn off the router, okay? And I'm going to go ahead, once I turn it on, I'm going to quickly shift over to the CLI tab. All right, so you can see it booting up. It's a simulator, so it's going to be quick. In the GNS3, it's even quicker. So you got to really look. So we'll test it out. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to go to CLI. And look at that. It's already, Flash is already decompressing into RAM. But the first part on the boot up process, all right, it's looking at the bootstrap. All right, the bootstrap is a part of the post, okay, which exists in ROM. This is just like a computer. It goes through all those different types of stages before you actually get to this point right here, which is already in RAM, okay? So again, that's the iOS. But how do you get to the iOS? How do you even get inside this router? Well, it's not clicking a CLI tab. You have a choice. If we go back and, well, let me go here real quick just to show you. You can see here, iOS, see the C2600? That is the particular operating system for a 2600 series router. If you had an 1841 router, this would say C1841. If you had a 2800 or a 7000 or a 9000 or 2500, whatever model or series of router you have, that would be the first thing. Then it goes into what the iOS does. You see it's a little bit encrypted because again, this is a 2600 router. This is what they consider an end-of-life router, okay? The version of it, which is 12.2, which is kind of old compared to what we're using now, which is 12.4T, all right? But here's what you would see on boot up, okay? What version of the iOS you were using. And the information previous to that, let me scroll up here, okay? This is your bootstrap. Where is it? There's your bootstrap version right there. All right, your bootstrap. Again, that is something stored in the microcode of ROM that helps you boot up the router and check all the hardware, okay? But again, how do you access this? How do you get to see this? Well, you need to connect to your router. So you have choices how to connect to your router. If you purchase a router that's not configured, complete blank configuration, which is not the case. If you purchase a router from Cisco, they'll have a default configuration. Think of it as a Linksys router that you will plug in and it gives you like a default IP setting. Just put yourself in the same network and then you'll be able to telnet into the router. But if there is no configurations whatsoever, you have no choice but to go in through the console port right there, okay? In order to get to that console port, again, you have choices. If you purchase a router from Cisco, they will send you a console cable. Now the console cable on one side has an RJ45 tip and on the other side has a DB9 connector that goes to your COM port. If you don't have COM ports anymore or you have a laptop or whatever, you don't have a COM port, you would then connect it to a USB, which you need to then order an adapter that can go from DB9 to USB, okay? And you can connect it to your USB port, okay? But that's the way you will get in. That's your line con 0, all right? You can make a console cable yourself. It's called a rolled cable. And you will use the 568A or B, I'm sorry, 568B standard on both sides. And then you can just plug it into the console port and then to, again, you will need a terminal adapter. So you can plug it into the terminal adapter and then to the COM port of your router. But Cisco's good about it. They will ask you really any company that you purchase a router from, and I'm being very loose, any company, at least let them know, hey, listen, I need a console port, okay? Because they should ask you, hey, do you need a console port in order to connect? How is it that you're going to connect to it? Do you have a COM port? Do you need a USB conversion? All right, so make sure that when you're purchasing the router, if it's a blank router with no configuration, this is going to be the only way that you're going to be able to get into your console, to get inside, where we saw this right here, okay? So you create that terminal session. And that's another thing. Once you plug in that cable to that console port, how do you get there? What do you create? What software do I use to access the router? I said it previously, again, in other lessons, or I think in this previous lessons. You will need either Hyper-Terminal, which doesn't exist anymore, okay, within, I think, well, Windows 7 doesn't have it, and neither does servers. So you could use PuTTY. Now there's two versions of PuTTY, the regular PuTTY or PuTTY-ND, which is very nice because you can create different tabs. All right, PuTTY is free. You can download it on the internet. There's no secrets about PuTTY. Everybody knows about PuTTY. All right, so you can download PuTTY and you can use PuTTY in order to do your telnetting or SSH or terminal sessions through your COM port. Okay, so PuTTY is a very good, useful tool. All right, now I'll show you exactly. I'll minimize this so I can show you how you would do that. Let's bring out a PC, just a generic PC, okay? And then we'll put it over here, okay? And then we'll choose our cable. Now remember the lightning bolt, all right? All right, doesn't want to play with me, okay? And we'll get the blue cable, which is your console cable. I have it right here in my hand, all right? I'm going to click on the PC. the RS-232, the router, and then the console port on the router. And this is exactly how you're going to see it on your exams. When you go take your CCNA certification, whether it's the new one or the one that's presently right now, when you do your simulations, okay, you're going to have to click on the computer in order to gain access to your router or your switch. So how do you do that? Once you click on the PC, okay, now you won't click on the desktop, a window already will be open, but you're going to create what's called a terminal session. This is simulating hyperterminal. You got to make sure that it's 9600 the baud rate and none, which I'm pretty sure is going to be, but just verify. These are the two that you're going to be looking at. The baud rate or bits per second and the flow control, make sure it's none, and then you click OK, and now you're inside your router. I'll maximize this for you, all right? And you can see you're in the same place with a very smaller font, all right, which I can't even see from here, all right, but you would say no at that point. I'll hit my keyboard, and then you're in user mode, and then you do your configurations. That's how you would do it on the test, and that's how you would do it in a real-world environment that your routers are not configured. It's not even if they're not configured. Let's say your routers, they are configured, but for whatever reason, you may not have access to the router through a telnet session because you don't have authorization, or you don't have the capabilities of SSH or telnet, or you don't have the capabilities of, let me go to the physical interface of the router. Oh, that's the server, sorry. Let me get the router here. You don't have the, maximize that, because you have an auxiliary port. Let's say auxiliary port is just like the console port, but it has modem pins. So you can actually dial into a router. But let's say you don't have the capabilities to dial in or the authorization to dial in. You may have no choice but to actually console into the router. So don't think that, well, you don't do that in the real world. Yes, you do. You will probably console into your router even if the router is configured based on the type of access you have. You may be allowed to console in. So you're not the main administrator. You're not the main Cisco person there. So that you may be a user that's allowed to do things. Okay? Again, you will console into your router. Okay? All right. So again, this is how you will console in to these types of routers. Now, these routers, let's talk about the router for a second, now that you know how to access it as far as to the console cable and we make a terminal session. You can see that these routers have slots. When I first started working with routers, there were the 2500 series routers, to be specific, 2501. The 2501 routers were fixed routers. What does that mean? Fixed router means they have no slots. What you buy, you get. You want 2 serial ports, 1 Ethernet port, that's it. You can't add to it. You want to upgrade? Well, guess what? You're going to have to buy another router. So those were fixed routers. The routers that we use today, and the routers that you're going to see here throughout this course and when you go out there, are the modular routers, which is the 2600, 1841, and 2011, which are the ones that we're discussing. These are modular routers where we're able to put in slots, okay, or modules, as you can see here on the side. One of the ones that we're going to be working with are these two. In this case, for this router, right, which has 2 WIC, and that's what they are, WIC modules. You see it says WIC or W1 and W0. Those are WIC cards. You can put serial modules in there. Now, here's a WIC 1T card, all right, and you can see it right down here. Now, I need to turn off my router in order for them to put it in there, and I'm going to go ahead and slide it in. Okay, my finger, I don't know. Let me go ahead and see if I can slide it in. There you go. That is a WIC 1T card, okay? That's how you're going to connect your serial cables to. We're unable to do that because, again, it's a card that you slide in. Think of just like putting in like a PCI slide. You're putting into your motherboard of your computer. Same thing, because there's a connector at the end. You just put that module right in there. Not hot swappable. Make sure your router's off. Now, we also have a WIC 2T, okay? And you can see it right here. This is what they call the smart serial. Why they call it the smart serial, I don't know. In all the books I've read, they've given no explanation. So I don't know why they call it that. All right, but you have 2 ports now on there. So you can actually have 4 ports that you can have on these 2 slots for 4 serial cables. Now, one main difference between these two is the bandwidth that is set to. The bandwidth that is set to. Off the top of my head, if I remember, these are set to 1.544 T1 speed. And this is slightly slower. I forget what the bandwidth was. we can always go inside and take a look at it. And you can go ahead, this will be faster than this one. You can actually mix and match those particular serial cables, okay? I mean those modules. You don't have to have both of them as WIC 2Ts or both of them as WIC T1s. You can have them separate. You can have them T1s or T2s. It really doesn't matter. You can mix and match, okay? So again, these are modular, but look, take a look at this one. Here you have a fast Ethernet, or it's capable of going just Ethernet, right? Ethernet is 10 megabits per second or 100 megabits per second. We have our console and auxiliary port. But what if we want to take out, let's say, an 1841 router? All right, be slightly different. Give me just a second here. Kind of sweating. These lights are killing me. I'm not used to that. Okay, just kidding. All right, let's bring up the 1841 router. And you can see it's slightly different, isn't it? Or much more different. All right, let's see if we can get both routers up here. Let me minimize this. Okay. Now we have here this. Let me zoom out just a little bit. I guess that wasn't just a little bit, huh? Okay. We have that one big slot, and you can see right here. We're here. You can take a look. Here we only have one fast Ethernet. We're here. Let's open. All right, I'm going to go to the laptop. Okay. Here we have two fast Ethernets. Where here we only have one. Now here we have two. And what's really nice, this also brings a USB port. Okay, we can back up to, all right. And look at this slot right here. This slit right here. That is for compact flash card. Guess what? That is where your iOS is. We're here in the 2600. It's internal. Here's an actual compact flash card. If that compact flash card is not there, your router won't boot. Your router won't boot. Oh, it'll boot. That's wrong terminology. It will boot, but you'll boot into something called ramen. Okay? Ramen you don't want to be in. That means it's missing the iOS or it's corrupted. So if you pull that out and you boot it up, you're not going to break it. You just will boot into ramen. It won't be able to do anything. At that point, you will need to work within ramen to try and make it boot to, let's say, a TFTP server and boot from an iOS at that point. Okay? But anyway, that's where your flash card for your iOS is. This one does not have one. And when we're looking, you see here, you have slot 0. And again, you can put whatever you want on that slot. And slot 1 is no longer called WIC 1 or WIC 2. Now it's a slot. Okay, so I could, again, let's say if I wanted more Ethernets, I can go ahead and put it in there. But of course, I have to turn off my router, as I said earlier. Okay, let's put an Ethernet in here. I can go ahead and put Ethernets in there as well. And I can also put a WIC 2T card in there. So we can have a combination of both. And this is the great thing about modular routers. They can change slots as you wish. Again, the iOS that you have will depend on what you can and can't do. That is the kernel. That is the core of the router. That is the operating system, okay? Just like in any computer, all right? But it still has a console cable and it has your auxiliary port, all right, for you to do. Now, let's take a look now. The 2600s end of life. Companies still use these routers. They are using the 12.4 T operating systems. But again, it's not something I think Cisco is supporting anymore. We've moved on to the 2811 or the 2800 series routers. And let's bring that guy up. Let's bring that router up right here, the 2811 router. Okay, and we'll open him up. This is a much bigger router. More expensive as well. All right, it's a very big router. The baby brother we just saw, which was the 1841, a lot smaller than the 2811. Okay, this sounds like an airplane taking off. Where the 1841, you don't hear it. Okay, and it has, this router you can see has a lot more slots. So you can have a lot more serial cables. You can have a combination of serial cables or fast Ethernet cables. You still have your fast Ethernet ports. Now you have, instead of just one USB, you have two USB slots, and you have a console and an auxiliary port, and right here, another optional port as well, volt for power, okay? But again, let's take a look at the operating system. What does it have? This is one of the new routers now with the 1841. Take a look at the name of the iOS. C2800, remember I said that. Advanced IP Services K9, right? The version of it. And we're using 12.4T. This is iOS. If it was XR, it would say something crazy, okay? Something else. But since it's iOS, now you can see very nice, very clear, okay? These integrated service routers, all right? And that's what this is, the integrated service routers, okay? For us to work with, they'll have these types of names for the operating systems. That way when we purchase them, what is it that you want to do? It's just like Linux, because this is Linux-based. As much as I fought with Linux, guess what? You better know it, okay? Because everything here is Linux-based. Now that you have to do Linux commands, okay? But that is just like that, just like Linux. Where Linux you have to buy operating systems specific to what you want to do, the same thing with these guys, all right? So again, there's your iOSs. I've shown you 3 routers, the 2600 routers, the 1841 router, and the 2000 router. Now, there's a difference. When the router boots up, and let's minimize this real quick. I want to see where we're at. I don't want to, like, remember, got my little guideline here. I showed you how to connect through console, through auxiliary. Now through the Ethernet port, obviously, I told you if you connect through the Ethernet port, and let's go ahead and use this router for an example, you would need, well, let's open up the packet tracer. You will need an actual cable. If I'm connecting to PC to router, what type of cable do I need? Come on, I know you know the answer. Straight through cable. No, I'm sorry, crossover cable. Very good. You almost had me there. Okay, so crossover cable. All right, so we go here, fast Ethernet, and let's plug in straight to the fast Ethernet port right there. Now you're going to see red dots because, again, this is off. If I configure an IP address on there, and if I configure Telnet on there, then I'll be able to Telnet into the router, which we're going to see in a little bit, okay? But that's how I would do it through a fast Ethernet port. It has to be configured. So your first step is that console port, so don't get confused with that, okay? Now, the boot process, okay? Here it says ROM, flash, NVRAM, and RAM. The first portion of the booter process, and I'll leave it here in the PowerPoint, the first part of the process, which when we booted up, you saw you couldn't see it. It was way too quick. The first thing that happens, yes, ROM. That's the bootstrap. Starts checking everything. It's the post, right? The bootstrap kicks it off. It does the post. Once it's done with the power on self-test, I know we're going back to A+ now, all right? Once it does that post, the very next thing that it does, it tries to locate the operating system, the iOS. Where's the iOS? The iOS is in Flash. If there's an operating system in Flash, the next step it goes is to NVRAM. And what does it do in NVRAM? It looks for that file, that startup config file, all right, that has configurations. Regardless or not, it looks for that file, all right, the startup config file. And then if it finds a configuration in NVRAM, then it loads the configurations and the iOS into RAM, okay? If it doesn't find a configuration, all right, if it doesn't find the configuration, that's why you see yourself. I had to pick the router that was off, didn't I? And let's move it this way. Let's turn it on. CLI, let's maximize. Okay, hey, look, a little slower router. We can see the boot process a little bit better. So now it found an iOS. It went through NVRAM. Now it's loading up, but it didn't find configuration. It found the file, but there's no configuration. And this is why you booted up to the configuration dialog, the little wizard. Because if you say yes, it's going to take you in a little step-by-step question and answer type to configure the router. All right, so that is the boot process. Again, ROM, from ROM, flash. From flash, NVRAM. And from NVRAM, we go to RAM. Okay, because in ROM, what do we have? The bootstrap kicks everything else, does the post. Second thing, hey, where's that operating system at? Oh, it's in Flash. Is there one there? Yes, great. Let's load it. Hey, but is there any configurations in NVRAM? There isn't, but the file is there. Continue to load. Let's decompress it. And that's what the pound signs mean when you start booting up. Let's decompress everything into RAM, and boom, you're there. All right, so that's the boot process. Now, we'll get into a little more detail in the next lecture in that. But essentially, that's the boot process of the router. Okay? All right. Let's take a look here. All right, now let's get into the different modes. We got user mode, we have privilege mode, and we have a whole bunch of other different modes. So let's talk about that real quick. All right? And let's use it using the router. Let's use this 1841. Now that we're in there, okay? Now that we're in there, okay? It's playing with me. All right. Now that we're there, we're going to say no. There's some mouse. There it is. All right. We're going to say no. And now there. You know you're in user mode when you see yourself with the greater than symbol. Now, what do you do in user mode? Nothing. Okay? It's basic monitoring commands. If you type a question mark, okay. Doesn't want to type the question mark? Okay. I guess my question mark on my keyboard doesn't work. So let's bring out this keyboard. All right. So if you type the question mark, shift. Oh, there it is. Okay. If you, I did it several times. I guess I didn't see it. If you type the question mark, these are the things that you can type on there. All right. As you can see, you have connect, disable, disconnect, log out, ping, resume, show. There's really nothing that you're configuring in user mode. There's nothing that you're doing that's dangerous to the router. You can't delete, you can't create anything. All right. So hey, your job may be just to ping things or to SSH into things. All right. So that could be what you would be able to access the router just in user mode. So you want to get to privilege mode, which we type enable. Now, once we're in enable, okay, you see your or privilege mode, you see a pound sign. Now we can run into trouble. Now we can do some damage, because here, I'm going to type it again in my keyboard because I couldn't believe that. Oh, okay, let me go ahead and close this. All right, here you can do a lot more commands, and one of the things that you can do is delete, which is a bad thing. You know, by the end of this course, I think I'm going to be like 10 pounds lighter, which is kind of good because I think I'm a little bit overweight. So, but it's hot. All right. Anyway, so we can delete configurations, such as the start config file, such as the flash. Can you do that? Yes, you can. Do you want to do that? No. All right. You want to upgrade your flash. You don't ever want to delete it. Unlike a PC, you can't format the C drive while you're in it. Okay, here you can delete the flash because everything is in different compartments. All right, so you could delete it, so you gotta be very careful. All right, you can erase the startup config. All right, and from here, I mean, the thing that I'll show you how to configure now, one of the two things we're gonna be configured on there. We're gonna put in the clock, and we're gonna put something called terminal history. All right, the terminal history is because when you're configuring, you want to be able to go back and forth quickly using the up arrow or the down arrow, the previous command, the next command, okay, or Control P, Control N as shortcuts, okay, where you can go ahead and bring up the commands you just typed. All right, so one of the ways that you do that, let me do Control C. Let's do first terminal history size, and I'll show you what's the maximum size, which is 256. All right, and when in doubt, question mark. Listen, you can question mark your way through a router any day of the week. You gotta know more or less what you want to try and do. All right, but the maximum size is 256. One of the things that you want to do is do that. Bring it so you can just, just keep going up, previous commands or next commands, whatever the case may be. And then the clock. Clock, set, and it's hours. I'll show you the format. Okay, it's hour, minutes, and seconds. So right now where I'm at, it's 12:18. So I'm going to go 12:18, we'll put 0 seconds, space. Then you put the month, day, and year. So today is May. Not May. Today is June. I don't know what part of the world I'm in. June 1st, 2013. All right, so now you have the clock set.